It gives me great pleasure to show you Dorothy's book, Me, Madam. And I'm going to ask Dorothy to introduce herself, give us a little background about her family, her education, career, and so on. So to you, Dorothy.
Yes, fine. I'd love to. Thank you for coming. I'm delighted that you're all interested in my book. I was born in New York City, Greenwich Village. My parents met when my father, well, he'd finished NYU Law School, but he was running for Congress with the Knickerbocker Party, a little small reform party. And eventually both my parents ran for Congress. At any rate, we moved to the suburbs, and I grew up in the suburb of New York City. From high school, I went to Brown University. The summer after I graduated high school, I worked for the Fresh Air Fund, an organization that brought kids from Harlem out to camps for 2 weeks. I loved the Fresh Air Fund and worked with them 4 different summers over 10 years. And it shaped a lot of my life. It was a very important experience in my life, working with kids and working with the situation. The kids were exploring and examining, experiencing a totally new atmosphere. And some of them said they missed the subway. It was too quiet in the country. The frogs were too noisy, Anyway, it was the Fresh Air Fund was very important. And then after college, I worked one summer with the American Friends Service Committee. We went to Mexico and lived in a village for 6 weeks. It's called Los Amigos. And the Friends had people living in the Mexican villages over a period of 30 years. Los Amigos was very famous in Mexico, and everyone loved Los Amigos. We had a fantastic summer where the girls worked in the schools and the guys were helping to build a hospital. So all those shaped my experiences. Then I felt I did a master's at Stanford, and I felt that I wanted to teach, but I wanted to work in the States or work overseas before I worked in the States. So I was applying or considering working overseas when the Peace Corps came along, and I knew I was a Peace Corps volunteer. That was it. I was ready. When at that summer, 1961, I was director of one of the Fresh Air Fund camps, and I came home and there was a telegram in the door. It said, report immediately to UCLA for training to go to secondary schools in Nigeria. So I did it. And the training was hard. Well, you probably remember some of this. You were volunteers, some of you mentioned. We had classes from 8 in the morning till 10 at night on everything imaginable. Nigerian history, American history, education, teacher training, tropical medicine, everything. And we tried to learn Igbo, Yoruba, and Hausa, 3 languages of Nigeria. There are 3 regions. I was assigned to the Eastern region, Igbo, that spoke Igbo. None of us really learned the languages. The African languages are based on you change the meaning by the sound. Low, low, medium, high, and not a different word. You change the inflections. And that's very hard for Westerners to understand and learn. Those languages are hard.
Because I'd like to read a little snippet from your book. So my impressions of Africa so far are hot, colorful, exciting. The people are friendly and eager to meet us. We've been welcomed everywhere. Everywhere too, we have seen buildings going up. We met 3 or 4 members of the Peace Corps group in Ghana. They spent their vacation visiting Nigeria. They've been teaching for 4 months already. They were overwhelmed by Nigeria and said its potential is infinitely greater than Ghana's. They were impressed with the electrification of so many towns and cities in Nigeria, by the diversity of agriculture and industry, and the size of the country. It seems undeniable that Nigeria will be the leading country in Africa in less than 5 years.
Well, it took a little longer than that, but Nigeria had just become independent in 1960, and we were there in 61. So they were very excited. It was the golden years. They were thrilled to be independent. I never saw any, not even a single tension between the English and Nigerians. The Nigerians respected the English. In front of the Nigerian parliament is a huge, larger-than-life statue of Queen Elizabeth. They spoke with a British accent. Most Nigerians still speak with a British accent. And the Nigerians were most respectful to the English. The English were most respectful to them. So those were the golden years. It didn't stay that way. Unfortunately, it fell apart after. All right, what did I do in Nigeria? So we got there December 31st, 1961. We were part of the first 400 volunteers sent overseas. At the 25th reunion, we learned that when they sent us overseas, the Peace Corps had not been approved by Congress. They used the argument that we have to vote for it because there are already 400 volunteers overseas. So it was a time, it was a moment. I was assigned to teach at Queen's School, Enugu. Enugu is the capital of the Eastern region, which is Igbo. The Igbo people are known to be the most intellectual, lively, anxious to learn. They're shorter people. And they took to when the missionaries came and said, come here, we'll teach you. They went for it. The Yoruba and the Hausa are beginning to climb in Nigerian politics. So obviously, Dorothy was getting acquainted with Nigerian politics. Places which the Igbo have occupied for years. The Igbo had no cultural heritage to fall back on when colonialism began. The Igbo were raided by other tribes and sold as slaves. It was the arrival of the missionaries which gave the Igbo a chance. The Igbos learned skills and attended schools and took the lead in the struggle for independence. The economy is virtually controlled by the Igbos, which is becoming increasingly resented by the other tribes. The educated and some brilliant Nigerians returning are needed in politics, but are not necessarily above bribery and corruption. Yes, if you remember the movie Roots, it was the Igbos who were raided for slaves by the coastal people, the Ibibio and the Efik and Ibibio people who lived on the coast. So I taught English and history at Queen's School, Enugu. Then I married another Peace Corps volunteer, Herschel, and moved to his compound. There's a picture of us. When we got married, I think we'd known each other about 4 or 5 months. When we telegrammed them and called them, told them we were married. I was delighted to move to the bush. Enugu was a city, after all. It was not really the authentic Nigeria. So that was nice. At his school, I taught geometry and algebra for a couple of months. I am no credential for teaching math, but I discovered I loved it. And I enjoyed teaching them geometry so much. And if you had told me that, I would not have believed you, but I did. Then University of Nsukka was a brand new university being created in the bush in Nsukka, where we were living. And I taught French there for a year. And that was wonderful. My students would run all over campus saying, bonjour, madame, comment ça va? They loved it. They loved learning and hearing the language. And and then it tells some of the things that happened at the university. I also went out in the bush, and when I look back on it now, it was risky. There are no signs. You don't know what road you're on. It's totally undisciplined. The villagers think the roads are for them. They don't have cars. So it was always crowded with people. And if you had an accident in the bush, you kept going because they would settle it right there and finish you off if you dared hurt any of them. So I didn't really know all that. I just set off in the bush, and I worked with 5 different villages trying to teach the women how to sew. The Nigerian women would wear wrappers, pieces of material wrapped around themselves. They didn't know how to make their clothes, and Father appreciated that. He wanted them to learn too. I do remember one incident, just to tell you kind of thing. I had had a pattern. I cut it out of a piece of plastic so that I could use it over and over again. I put it down on the material, and I was cutting out the blouse or the dress with a pair of scissors. And all of a sudden, a breast dangled in front of me. And I, terrified that I would hurt the person, I said, excuse me, please. She wanted to see what I was doing, and she was bending over. In the villages, most of the people don't wear any clothes. Sometimes the women wear something around their waist. But anyway, so this breast was dangling in front of me, and I had to step back and move to be careful not to hurt her. So it was an interesting experience. In one village, a woman hid in her house. She was so terrified of seeing a white woman. And I went over to talk to her and said, I am a woman. Do you not want to meet me? I thought, okay, please don't be upset. She was just terrified. In the English colonies, men ruled. They were the district officers, and they sent their wives and children to Switzerland while they were serving. In the French colonies, everybody came. The children, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles. The French brought their whole family. But in the English colonies, they did not see the children or the women. So I was fascinating to them. Then I would sit in Father's church. I loved watching him doing a service. I would feel hands touching my arms and pulling my hair. I wanted to see if it came off. And they were touching my arm to see if it came off. Sometimes they put chalk on their bodies because they thought it made them more beautiful. That was sad. Father knew they loved the pageantry, and he'd walk up and down the aisles, swinging the incense. He'd say, in nomine patri. And they would imitate him, say, in nomine patri. Pax will be scum, pax will be scum. They love the sound of the language and the rhythm. And he knew it. So he'd go on. And I'd tease him afterwards. I said, you did quite a show. And he just giggled. Anyway, that was the bush. I loved going out in the bush. And besides, that was when I would teach French in the mornings at the university and go out in the bush in the afternoon to the villages. And I also had a little choir of the boys at St. Teresa's. In the villages, there was no way to know how old anybody was. There were no birth certificates. So you were born before the last big storm or something. So these were secondary school students, boys, but I think they probably were in their 20s if we consider it, because their voices were rich, low, and wonderful. It was like directing 15 Paul Robesons. I mean, swing. They had no musical education, so I had to sing to them. Swing low, and they would swing low. And, oh, it just gave me chills. They're such beautiful voices. And anyway, we performed for the school assemblies, and that was great fun. I totally enjoyed that. There's a picture of called in my duodecimals, I think on page 65. Anna, if you have, and that shows the boys. And I did all kinds of, let me see, there they are. They're my guys. Yeah. And okay, so besides I learned the high life, and at the university there were 30 Peace Corps volunteers. They were there before us even, and they were teaching in different departments. And I really got to know those volunteers. The volunteers that I trained with, 50 or so of us, were dispersed all over the country. So I never saw most of them again, which is kind of sad. I think you had a question of, am I involved anymore with Nigeria? Something like that. I have not ever been back to Nigeria, no. But there is an organization called Friends of Nigeria, which are all of the volunteers who served in Nigeria. And Peace Corps was kicked out in 66, 67 after the Biafran War because Peace Corps volunteers were feeding the children. And they said that we prolonged the war. Well, of course we were feeding the children. We worked with the children. Of course we were feeding them. So we were kicked out. We went back in the 90s, about 2 years in the 90s. So it has been a very long time. But I had a Friends of Nigeria meeting last week on Zoom, and there were 58 people. People have stayed so close and in touch. We have a newsletter 3 times a year. And I'm astonished that not only that, people have, many of them have been back and they've pursued research on Nigeria. And we sponsor projects, give money and sponsor projects in Nigeria of all kinds. We had 3 amazing speakers. I'm just amazed that Friends of Nigeria is still alive and vibrant so many years, and we haven't been there since the 90s. So that's my present contact.
You talked about the Well Baby Clinic, so I'd like to read a little bit from that. The health center arranged for a Well Baby Clinic, and hundreds of mothers came with their babies. Some of us were judges. We looked carefully over the babies. Elizabeth Leadham, who the World Health Organization person, and nurses helped us. It is extremely difficult to raise children in the tropical rainforest. All tiny bacteria grows out of control. If you scratched yourself, within half an hour, it would look red and angry and could become infected easily. Mothers had no access to any ointments or other medication for fevers, for example, which were common and usually meant malaria. In the bush, no one took quinine. We took quinine tablets every week to protect us. Babies could have fevers, rashes, worms, terrible diseases, and malnutrition. There was little access to protein or fruit or understanding of balanced diet. So would you like to talk a little about that?
Well, mostly they ate cassava. You had that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, yams. So you sliced the yam and boiled it for breakfast. You sliced it, boiled it, and mashed it for lunch. And then you sliced it and boiled it again for dinner. And it makes you feel full and you've had a whole meal. But of course, it's only starch. And they had the tsetse fly thrives in the tropical rainforest. It attacks the large animals. So there were no large animals. There was very limited source of protein. They had big rhinoceros beetles they ate. And they had no understanding that you have to have a balanced diet and have some fruit, some vegetables, and some meat. Yes, in the villages we saw children with extended stomachs with kwashiorkor, which is protein deficiency. Yes, it was very sad. And my friend Elizabeth, the World Health nurse, that's what she was trying to do, was teach them nutrition. They believed that if a pregnant woman ate an egg, she was eating someone's baby. So the young women didn't get the eggs. The men ate the eggs. She was trying to persuade them to put eggs in their cassava when they mixed it up. And we did that. We went out to the village and we served them with cassava we had cooked with an egg in it, and they knew that, and they all ate it. But we thought when we leave, they aren't going to do this. It was too much of a time.
Was life expectancy very low, Dorothy?
Oh, I would say probably 30, 35 years. The oldest person in the village was very revered and admired, and I have a picture, I think, in my albums of the oldest woman in the village, and she's very admired. But she's, it's a miracle they survived. When they stopped nursing them about 6-7 months, the babies crawl on the ground, and they're eating everything, the dirt. It's a miracle. It's a miracle that they survived. Totally.
What led you to write this book?
Oh, I had all these letters. It's based on 100 letters I wrote home, and I carried them around with me for some 50 years. I could not figure out how to put them in a book. I wanted to do something. I tried writing a narrative. It didn't work. I tried this, I tried that. And then I joined a memoir writing group about 2012. And that did it. I was able to finally see a way to put it, and I met a wonderful editor. Oh, she is the wonderful editor. She's also, I think, a member still of FAB, even though she lives in Oregon. I brought her into FAB. And Jan has done 6 books with me now. I just love her, and she could take what I had and put it together. She's amazing. On the back cover, it shows me with Sergeant Shriver at the 30th reunion. And then I think the Well Baby Clinic is over here on the back cover. Anyway, Jan is just wonderful. So I'd give her my letters, I'd type them up or put them in the way she could read them, and she understood how to put it together. She really kept me going and very patient, and I was just thrilled. I couldn't believe I had actually able to put these letters in a book. So
you were actually writing with a group, a FAB group or another group?
Well, I stayed with the memoir group for a while, and then I was with a larger writing group for some years. And then ultimately I wrote a book about them called Through the Writer's Eye. My books are on Amazon. They're available on Amazon, all 6 of them. The last 2 came out during COVID, so I wasn't able to do much publicizing anything with them, but the one called Through the Writer's Eyes has 17 authors. It's the people in my writing group, a picture of them and little bio, and then copies of what they've written. So I'm just thrilled I was able to get all that out. I'm actually writing another one now on my travels. I've been to 38 countries.
But I know you've written some poems also.
Yes. My trip to India was really quite hard, very difficult. But I don't know what your assignment was in India. You were a volunteer in India, right?
When I read your book, Dorothy, I realized I didn't know very much about Nigerian history, so I read a little bit about Nigerian history. And I learned from that women were extremely important in Nigerian history, that they were the ones who really stood up to the British when they tried to tax them and so on and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit about your impression about Nigerian women?
Well, it's really a male-dominated society. The women are the strength behind them, but it is a male-dominated society. The women have earned their place I believe now Nigerian women are really something now. They go for higher education and they have very impressive jobs, and they are a serious force. No, I really don't know. I haven't studied specifically that area, so I don't know more than that. I know that the boys in my math class, they respected me. The teachers, when the boys stand up when you come in the room and stand up again when you leave. And the title of my book comes from some of that. You have to read the book to know.
Are the mothers the power in the household?
Well,
Are
the
the
boy
women-
in the secondary schools where we taught, they the boys live at the schools. You don't meet their parents. But most of them in the villages they were from, the village was very, very proud of them and had raised money to pay their tuition. So they were very good students, very conscientious and respectful. But you never meet their parents, no. It's not the same concept as American public education at all.
Since we're coming close to the end of time, there was one letter that you wrote when you were leaving, which I thought was interesting. So many of the American faculty and all of the Peace Corps are leaving in 6 to 8 weeks. It will be awful when they leave, but the thought that we will be leaving as well makes it bearable. We have our ticket. We have to reserve them early in order to take advantage of the half-rate airline rates. They go up next month. There were special rates for transit travel, which means spending 1 night here, 2 nights there, and so on. But now one has to pay full fare. We'll fly from Enugu to Lagos on July 27. We have our final medical exams on July 30, 31, and fly to Cairo on August 1. Hirsch, that's Dorothy's husband, has a suspicion that King Hussein in Jordan will lose his throne about that time. He thinks that the entire Arab alliance will march on Israel, which will make a state of emergency throughout the Middle East, in which case we won't get off, but on to Rome. This she wrote in 1963, so a little before 1967. So he was actually ahead of his time. Okay, we are about out of time. So thank you so much, Dorothy. It was really interesting. And
I have some books at my house that I can sell for $10, which is a little cheaper than Amazon, if you wish to. And I think you will enjoy it. It was a joy to do.
And Vivian will put the recording up on the FAB list, so anybody who couldn't come can watch it later on. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.